Well, it is a pleasure to be here today. It is my great privilege to be here, and I want to let you know, as Pastor said, my wife and I and our two kids, we're missionaries in Beirut, Lebanon. Don't feel sorry for me. I live in paradise. Lebanon, just so you know, is we're just north of Israel. We're south and I guess west of Syria. And part of Lebanon is actually named in the Bible as the Promised Land, and that's how I would describe it. So we don't have any sad stories. God has taken very good care of our family, and I want to say a special thanks to your pastor. A few years ago, I'd have to think about when that was. We met your pastor at a Starbucks. And my wife and I, we had arranged a series of meetings introducing ourselves and our ministry to churches that we didn't know. And part of the communication piece that your pastor was mentioning, and it was maybe we had just arrived from Lebanon the day before, I think, when we met you. And your pastor was so encouraging to us, just sitting for an hour talking about things. We left that meeting believing that we could do this. We could go out and meet, I said 50, I think it was 63. We met with 63 pastors in 50 days. We drove 13,000 miles. Don't do that. If you can avoid that, do. But your pastor encouraged us. See, in John chapter 1, the Bible says, grace and truth came by Jesus Christ. I love that verse, and in the context of that verse, we see John introduce us to Jesus as the Word. Our words are containers, and God filled up the container of Jesus and put all of His grace and all truth in Him and gave Him to us. See, your pastor, that when we met him that day, he put faith and a confidence in his words, and that just carried us through. And so I want to say thank you. I want to say thank you for that. And I have actually, we get the privilege of sharing with other missionaries. A part of what we do in Beirut is we're developing missionary leadership training program specifically to minister in the Arab world. And I relate that story. I don't know how many times I've told that story. So I did bring a couple of slides. Primarily, they are for me to remember to make sure I say everything. I don't want to shortchange you, right? But it's hopefully not a dull presentation. So if we could show that, I want to just introduce my family. My wife, who is my better half, her name is Julie. Julie, she conducted service this morning in Beirut. Our church that we've planted in Beirut is called Go Church Beirut, and we're moving from our initial launch location into a movie theater. We're going to have our first service April 12th on Easter in a movie theater, and that will be the very first time, as far as I know it's the very first time in Beirut, and it'll be the very first time there's ever been an evangelical church meeting in a theater, I think, in the Middle East. So I don't know that we get a trophy for that, but I thought it was cool. And then that's my son Trenton and my daughter Caitlin, and they're 15 and 14. They're in school. They're in Lebanon, which is why my wife didn't come and enjoy it. Lebanon is home to us. When we're here, my kids say, "When are we going home?" I was just talking to my daughter this morning, and she said, "You'll be home next week." So home is Lebanon, and I can talk a lot about Lebanon. If you don't know me, just take my word for it. People that know me know I can talk a lot about Lebanon. But they say that a picture is worth 1,000 words. So we have a very short video I'm going to ask if you guys can play it. And this will just give a little bit more background, some moving images. And you can see a picture of my wife and I before we lost a lot of weight.
Hey guys, Matt and Julie Hattabaugh here in Beirut, Lebanon. We just want to share with you a little bit about what we're doing here.
A question that I get asked a lot is, what is Lebanon like? And the best way I can answer that is Lebanon is like an open door, because there's an opportunity here that is really special, and it's up to us as the church to take advantage of that. This is the only country of the 23 Arab-speaking nations in the Middle East and North Africa where it's free to preach the gospel, it's free to convert from any religion and faith to Christianity, and it's free and open for us to train others to do that as well. So we see a strategic opportunity to not only reach the 8 unreached people groups that live here inside of Lebanon, but the 500 million people that live in the Middle East and North Africa. This is a perfect place from which we can reach into those countries.
In 2016, after we moved over here, we led an all-Lebanese mission trip to the Syrian border, where we got to meet a wonderful young lady named Bushra. Her smile is beautiful. She just draws you in. We got to share the gospel with her, and we also got to send her away with one of the audio Bibles from World Mission.
So we thank God for the opportunity to get to know people here. We love the Lebanese people, and one of those is Rafi. Rafi is an essential part of our team now, but he started out as a guy that I needed someone to take me to the airport to pick Julie and the kids up. As we went on, we built a really strong friendship, and out of that friendship we were able to share the love of Jesus with him in a relational way, until one day he asked me about becoming part of what we were doing. I'll never forget, one day, we'd been together for quite some time. He said, "Would Jesus use me?" And I love that day, because that's why we came here. We came here for that question, and to say yes, Jesus will use you. Because we want to work ourselves out of a job as missionaries and raise up the local Lebanese, and to be able to say yes to that question. Yes, Jesus will use you. And it's not just Rafi. Jesus will use you too. We believe that everyone is called to missions. That doesn't mean everyone's called to live in another part of the world. Some go and some send. And we thank God for those that send, because it's what you're doing, strengthening your local church, strengthening the church where you serve, that enables us to be here and to be your representative in the Middle East.
We're only able to go and to reach into the lives of others by your support. We thank God for you, we pray for you, and we love you.
So that's a little bit about Lebanon. And a couple of testimonies there. The church that you saw, we've planted actually 3 churches in Lebanon since we've been there. And that one is right at the Syrian border. So it's about 7 miles from the outskirts of Damascus. It's a little less than 1 mile from the border. And we're really thankful for the opportunity to be there. We're thankful for the grace that God has given to us. Grace is a big word of the Bible. And it's something that I want to talk a little bit about today. But grace, we could say it simply, and this is the way we say it when we're, communicating to people that that are not English first language speakers. Grace is just everything that God has given us in Jesus. And we have experienced, since we've moved there, God's grace for that nation. 1 Corinthians chapter 16, I mentioned it there in the video. Lebanon is like an open door. When I first went there in 2015, the Lord gave me this verse in 1 Corinthians chapter 16, verse 8. Paul was writing to the church at Corinth, and he said, "I have decided to stay here in Ephesus because I have found that there's an open door, and that open door is effectual." And that effectual, what we could say there, that just means that there's a working, there's an effect that's happening. And so what was the effect of that? Well, Acts chapter 19, and we also see in Romans that the effect of that is within 2 years of Paul being there in Ephesus. Ephesus is in modern-day Turkey, that the whole nation heard the gospel. Now, that doesn't mean that every resident in the nation heard the gospel, but we see from the Acts account that there were leaders that were raised up. There were leaders that were raised up throughout that country, throughout that nation. And for 500 years, I won't bore you with church history, but for 500 years, that was the center of Christianity. The book of Revelation, written by John, starts with Jesus saying, "Write to the churches in Asia." Those churches were there as a result of Paul's decision to stay at Ephesus and raise up leaders. So our purpose in Lebanon in these days is to raise up leaders. We're planting churches, and we're planting churches for the specific reason to create a model of church that doesn't depend on support from the outside and doesn't depend on, Western Bible school graduates. I'm an American Bible school graduate, and I think that I'm a huge hindrance to church growth there, right? Because I could be ejected from the country. We're coming up, we have Lebanese residency, and that residency process is about to start over. So every time it starts over, we're just, thank you, Lord, for favor. And especially, and this is a prayer point, in October of this past year, I actually have some photos on the slide. In October of this past year, current events, I think it's called, we saw a revolution start in Lebanon. October's kind of a popular month for revolutions. I don't know if there's like a planning thing that happens. If you look through history, lots of things happen in October. So October 17th, I know it's October 17th because we were starting a new outreach that day, and some people got stuck in the protests. So we had to cancel. But the protest was, they were protesting the sitting government. The government has resigned. We had about a little less than 2 months where we were just pretty much stuck in the house for a while. We called it Snow Days, which was fun for a little bit until we watched all of the Christmas movies that we had. So my wife put up the Christmas tree in October because we were just pretending it was snow. And but thank God it remained peaceful. These are screenshots from the news. Supernaturally, peace has remained. I won't bore you with all the politics. Lebanon is an independent nation. It's the only country in the Middle East where it's free to preach the gospel, but it is also a nation that is, I'll be careful what I'm saying because it's recorded, but it's there is a declared terrorist organization that is part of the government and a big factor in society in Lebanon. And that has an agenda driven by Iran and is very much anti-Israel and not so friendly to the United States either. So these elements are there, but supernaturally, I say supernaturally, they have remained at peace. And that has produced two things. One, it creates the environment for us to continue to be there and raise up leaders. And second, it is a witness to the whole region that in a place that really, Lebanon, most people think of Lebanon, they think of civil war. It lasted for 25 years. All those elements of that conflict are still there. And yet there's no war, there's no conflict. It's supernaturally peaceful. And so that's our continued prayer, is that peace remains, and the fact that the government is sort of in flux, that as we submit our paperwork for our residency renewal, that whoever is at their desk that day just approves it. So that's what we're expecting. Since we've moved there, I have one more slide I'll refer to. Since we've moved there, we've recorded 600 decisions for Jesus. And we thank God for that. Not all of those people are part of Go Church, and that's by design. We've planted a church at the Israeli border, and we saw 230, I'd have to look it up, but a little more than 230 people give their life to Jesus. They're in that circle down there at the bottom, right there at the Israeli border. In fact, just a little Bible trivia question for you, in case you're asked. When the Bible says Jesus departed to the coasts of Tyre and Sidon, that's where that church is. So, which is kind of cool. And they have really great figs there. I totally get why Jesus liked figs. And then the church at the Syrian border is actually a building that was built by a Western denomination, but closed as a result of the war. And we found that it was just unused, and so we got permission, and we relaunched a church there. And we're currently believing God for an Arabic-speaking pastor. Lebanon is very small. It's 155 miles from north to south. If you drive very fast for very far, you'll be in a different country. But there's 2 mountain ranges there, so it takes a while to get back and forth. It's difficult for us to be in Beirut and then over at the Syrian border. So we're looking, if any of you speak Arabic and are interested in pastoring a church, that is an open ministry position. And then the other thing, I don't have it up there, but we've distributed 6,000 audio Bibles. So a lot of Arabic people don't read Arabic. And having studied Arabic, I know why. It's really hard. Arabic is what they call diglossic. So written Arabic is almost an entirely different language than the Arabic that is spoken. And the written Arabic is frozen in time because of the Quran. And so because of the way the Quran is held or viewed, there's a religious resistance to any change in the writing of Arabic letters. So, spoken Arabic is quite a bit different. That means that a lot of Arabic-speaking people don't read Arabic, so you could give them an Arabic Bible, but it would be like giving it to me or you. We just don't read it, and they can't either. So we have found a ministry that gave us solar-powered audio Bibles recorded in Arabic. We have a few different translations. Charles Stanley Ministries produced those and gave them to us. And I think in October of this year, we're actually going to be featured in the In Touch magazine. But what is so powerful about that? And we distribute these, and people love them, and they have done studies that up to 12 people will listen to one unit because they live in community. It's very much different than Western society. Western society, we close our doors, we plop down, we want to sit by ourselves, we like plenty of room. And that's just not Arabic society. Everything's in community, which is great for starting churches, by the way. But they will listen to it in groups. And we've actually had accounts where I've had team members walk into a shop and the Bible is playing in the store. But just this past week, I was teaching at a mission school, and I met a man from Singapore who has 6 Bible schools in Indonesia, and he shared his testimony. And his testimony was, like I said, I just heard this last week. His testimony was somebody walked up and gave him a Gideon New Testament. He was Buddhist. He was rich. His family was very well off. He's a young guy. He didn't have any problems. He wasn't sad. He was just a college student. Everything's fine. Happy being a Buddhist. Happy being, wealthy and living in Singapore. Somebody hands him a Gideon New Testament, He read the table of contents and said something spoke to him. And then he just read through the Gospels and gave his life to Jesus. I almost just changed my ticket and went and let's just pass out Bibles. The table of contents? Come on. So I love that story. Anyway, so we've passed out 6,000 audio Bibles. We're really excited about that. And that's in Lebanon and Syria. We've also, through a missionary contact that we have in Erbil, we've got those into, would that be Western Iran? And then in Farsi, and then also in the Kurdish languages, which are odd sounding, but in Syriac and Kremunji, and also in Kurdish. So that's a little bit about what is happening in Lebanon, and how that relates to you, or why that's important to you, is none of that would be happening if it weren't for you. See, Ephesians chapter 4 paints this picture of what the church is. Paul has this revelation that he shares. In fact, in Ephesians 3, he said that God has given me a grace. I'm returning back to that word. He's given me a grace. So Paul understood that he was responsible. He actually used the word steward or manager. So God has given me grace. Remember, I just said grace is everything that Jesus has done for us. And God put all of that in Jesus, but Paul said, I have been given a grace to manage, and my grace to manage is to share the message of Jesus to the nations. And in that message, he said, I have seen things. He uses the Bible word revelation, in the King James, the revelation, but that just means seeing. And so he said, I've seen things about the church. I've seen things about the plan of God that I'm supposed to give to the nations. So Paul was a man of purpose. He said that in Timothy and Titus. He says, you know the purpose I live my life by. He's a man of purpose, and that purpose is to manage the grace on his life, to share the message of Jesus to the nations. And his picture that he used so that I could see what he sees is in Ephesians chapter 4. Ephesians chapter 4, verse 16 says that the church has gifts in it. And those gifts are apostles and prophets and pastors and teachers. And those gifts have a specific purpose. And that purpose is to equip. Equip who? Equip us. Equip the church. Why? So that every member joins to another, and the supply in me, the supply of what? The supply of grace in me flows to you. The supply of grace here in Burleson, Texas, is flowing into the Syrian border, the Israeli border, and the city of Beirut, named after Caliglia's granddaughter, which is where the name Beirut comes from, in case you want to know. It's kind of an ugly name for a granddaughter. Caligula is not much better. There's grace here. Grace is what? Everything that God has given. And because of the joint that your pastor was able and willing to open to us, that flows into what's happening there. What does that mean? Those 600 decisions for Jesus is because of this church. There's a direct link. That's the way God sees it. Let me put that in a different way. I love children's ministry. If Go Church had a sign, which it doesn't, but if it did, I would want to put under the sign, adult ministry also provided. Because to me, children's ministry is just where it's at. In July, we're going to do a big kids outreach, inflatables, and I've got a team coming from Ohio. I'm super excited about it. I just want it to be July. And in August, we're going to do a basketball camp in Beirut, and then that will feed into a new Alpha course, which is what we use as our first intake point for Go Church. And we have a simple discipleship track that's called the ABCs, and it starts with Alpha, which is where we get the A from. And it's like just a real generalized course that's designed for anybody to use, specifically not like a Bible teacher to use. And that's what we're going to do this summer. I love children's ministry. If you volunteer your time in the children's ministry here in this church, it makes this church strong. This church strong allows the supply of grace to flow over to what's happening in Lebanon. That means that children's workers in Burleson, Texas are affecting the Great Commission. Mark 16, Jesus said, "Go into all the world and preach the gospel." The way that's going to happen, according to Paul, is that every joint is equipped, joined together, and supplying. And I just want to make that point, that what we do here affects the whole world. I'm talking about Lebanon because that's what I know. I'm going to close with this. At the Syrian border, the church there, it's a village called Kafr Zabad. Kafr Zabad means village of Zabad. Kafr is village. We invited the whole town, just everybody we could, said, "Come on, we're going to have a special meeting," and we put together boxes of food, a month's worth of food stuff. Come, and we, organized it in a way where we could get names, so we knew who we were giving these things to, so we could build relationships. And then, once we got them in the room, I'm not saying it was a bait and switch, but we gave them the gospel too. No, we told them, "Come on, we're going to have some music. We're going to share the message of Jesus." I love this day, and this is just one example. It's just one day. And where the church is, maybe 500 yards away, is a mosque. The church was filled. Now, the church was filled not because they wanted to come hear me preach. In fact, I didn't preach that day. And it certainly wasn't for the music. Wow. It was bad, just so you know. There was a Casio involved. So, but people came. I'm guessing they came for the food, right? We had a guy get up and he just shared the simple message of Jesus. He's a beef farmer from Iowa, and he was there for a short-term trip. And as far as I know, it was the very first time he had ever spoken publicly. At least it seemed like it. And he just shared the simple message of Jesus through an interpreter. Do you know what happened? Everybody said, "I want Jesus." Everybody. Do you know why? Because God has given us grace. And that grace flows out when we all just do our part. I don't have to do everything. I just have to do my part. So all these people received Jesus. And this has happened several times, and it always shocks visitors where they're like, did they not understand? They all said yes. Maybe they didn't understand. And I said, no, it's fine. We're used to it. And so we invited, we said, is anyone sick? Does anyone have any needs that they want us to pray for? Well, this woman, she was Syrian. She was Muslim. She was actually Shiite Muslim. And she brought her baby. And her baby had these great big, looked like they were hearing aids, but they looked more like earmuffs. And through the interpreter, she said, my baby can't hear. We didn't know that her baby had also never spoken. He was maybe 4. Again, just the volunteers that were there with us, they looked at me and I said, go ahead. Lay their hands and pray for this little baby. And then the interpreter just, she's excited. She says, in Arabic, she says to the woman, she said, take the hearing aids out. So she takes them off, and they make that squealing noise. So she shuts them off. And the interpreter asks the little boy, she said, say Jesus. Y'all want to hear what happened? Little 4-year-old Muslim boy. And the mom knows he's never spoken. We don't. I don't know why that didn't occur to us, but say Jesus. That little boy says, Yeshua. Very first word. Very first word. Say Jesus. Jesus. I watched that little boy and his mom walk out later when we dismissed the meeting. He had apparently a lot to say because he was just jabbering away. And just going on and on. Why do I share that story? That's not, oh wow, look what God used my family to do. No. This was a volunteer on a short-term mission trip. You know what that is? God's grace. It's His grace. It's His ability put in the package of Jesus and turned loose because us are willing to let Him work.